Thanks for being here. I was walking and I was having these really deep thoughts moving in between fields of judgment and discernment. And Spirit really illustrating to me within the fields of creation the differences between what is judgment and what is discernment. And why that is so important to understand the judge and also the freedom of discernment. And so the example I was shown was like ice cream. And let's say that I want to lose weight and I want to be able to get on a path to health. And part of that is I want to shed some pounds. So now I'm hungry, I'm starving, and I want something to eat. And I see in my pantry and all the food that I have, I've got all of these choices, I've got all of these options. And what I've got is I see I've got ice cream. And I feel that little like pull, like, ooh, ice cream. And I see all of these other things in there. So just with that example right there, we could frame that through discernment, right? So I've got all of these options. It's all available to me. There is nothing wrong with any one of those choices. But the choice of ice cream, is that going to move me towards my goal or away from my goal? And if I left it in that kind of neutrality of, yeah, I don't want ice cream. I love ice cream, but I'm not going to choose ice cream because that's not going to move the needle for me. I'm not going to move closer to what it is that I want. I then know that's a no. And then I can choose something else. So maybe I choose instead hummus that, somehow meets the hunger component and it meets the health component. And so it becomes a choice of all of my options that works. Now take discernment of all the options. There's nothing wrong with any option. What's moving me towards my goal? To now let's put on the framework of judgment. So for me, judgment is like a lesser octave of discernment. Discernment is like a superpower that creates freedom just in and of itself, because it has included judgment, but it has gone beyond judgment. So when I'm in judgment, I've got things that are good for me and things that are bad for me. And now that it's not just a word, notice that the good in my body and in your body, when I've got something good, I've got something bad for me. It creates a visceral sensation in the body that pulls me towards choosing something. Now, let's say in discernment, where I've got all the options on the table, I choose ice cream. I know that that's not moving the needle towards me, but I'm not judging myself for choosing that. In judgment, I choose ice cream and I have very complex feelings. I feel maybe guilty. I feel bad, like I transfer the action and I associate that with me. Now I'm bad for choosing that. It's a very separating sensation to be in the field of the judge with judgment that has evaluated the goodness, the rightness, and the wrongness of something. and is making good and bad. And you notice when you play with that, and I imagine most of us have these kinds of experiences, you choose the thing. Even when you choose the quote-unquote right thing, there's still a charge about it, like either I'm patting myself on the back, like, good job, I've overcome my lower nature, like, I have chosen the right thing, the good thing. And it's still creating or generating a certain sense of pushing away from the bad. There's not an equalizer or an equanimity within the field of the judge. It generates for us very deep visceral feelings that actually entrain us more and more to choices based off of how we feel. And because, as we know, choosing from places of separation that cultivate within us the rightness and wrongness really keeps us in another prison that we are often not aware of, that we walk around with, which is an unconscious mantra or affirmation that we say that's I can't. And the reason is because the bad, right? We've often identified more with, I could do that, but I can't. I could, but I can't. You see that a lot, really, when you can see that in religion, where, all is possible, and there are certain things within each religion that it's right in this religion, and you're good or aligned if you do those things, and then not okay, and you've fallen out, and which is not good, and then the burden of the bad falls on you. And somatically or viscerally, we do live our lives often attuned to these heavier forces of separation. We're in the higher octave now, moving back to discernment. The judge, where it's judging and evaluating based on rightness and wrongness, which gives a certain, if you're wrong, you're imprisoned. And if you're right and good, it could easily be another prison, right? Just because you think you're doing the right things doesn't mean in the greater universal truth those are actually right. They might be right for your dogma, they might be right for your religion, they might be right in the stage or step that you're in your own evolution. That might be right, but in the greatest scheme or reality that is universal to all, there's still more to go. There's still deeper truths that are waiting to be discovered that would release you from the prison that you don't see you're in. That's it, too. So within discernment, you've got all the possibilities. You can eat from the whole table, a plethora of a cornucopia of whatever you want. The question will often be, if we can tune in, is this going to bring me closer to myself or further? Is what I want to say going to bring me closer to myself and the other, or further? It's not then in that way, from the discerning question, because everything's available, there's no right or wrong. The question itself has included, in a way, the judge. The judge who's like, yeah, that's saying that will hurt the other person, and that hurts you. Don't say that. It's inclusive. but it has raised the octave where the availability to say it is present. You can say it. You can make that choice. And if we lived by what the judge says within separation and the visceral forces that generally pull us to right and wrong, and we live within these frameworks, we are often not free to break out of our own ingrained choices that we've reinforced in time, the patterns and grooves that we've created by making these right and wrong and even building them up like morality or ethicality within our system. To go against that within our own system, then, even when it would be the right thing to do, would be very, very difficult. And we might fail that test to break out of our own system because we're really not free from it. We think we're free, but we've built forces inside of us that are actually pulling us to think in this way instead of universally and within the vastness of what's possible, what's right for me in this moment. Not in all space and time, because how could I, in this moment, without the question, how could I tune into all space and time within my own spiraling evolution of learning my own vastness? How would I know? And that judge is not going to let you free yourself to ask the questions because of the deep visceral attachment and association with the rightness and wrongness of it, the morality and ethicality, and the identification with the goodness and badness as a person over the utility of choice in one moment to the next. Another example that occurs to me in the moment is something that I really see a lot of: tangled mental, emotional weavings, where if we have a tendency to be kind and we speak kindly, and let's say that we meet up with somebody in our life who isn't quite as self-aware, isn't quite as attuned to others, that relationship with that person becomes a testing ground for our own patience and our own tolerance and our own forgiveness and all of the virtues there. It's not uncommon that we reach a saturation point, and often while we're learning what our own edges are of what we can and can't hold, maybe tolerate, that the person begins to wear on us. We start to see that they're trespassing. They say things that aren't so kind, and we're no longer able to transform those or transfigure them or their comments. And we start to feel inside of ourselves like tenser, maybe even a dislike. And before you know it, that interaction with that person, you start to notice that trespass that we weren't calling out before in kind ways, or maybe we were, they keep doing it anyway. And we could have a judgment about that, the rightness and wrongness of them doing that. But it's more about how we respond or react to people. And we might find that there's a learning curve in there of how we grow ourselves. And sometimes we don't notice until our nervous system has been triggered in a way where something arises within us that draws us to contrast, and we reflect and we say, oh, that is not how I want to behave. What is going on here? And in that moment that we react and we say something that we recognize as unkind, it doesn't fit our moral or ethical paradigm. The question would be, how do we relate with that? Do we judge ourselves for reaching our saturation point? Do we judge the other for pushing us to that point? Do we become bad because we reacted in a way that the other, in a way, co-created with us, and now we're left dealing with the aftermath of the feelings of that and our lack of control in that moment? And how do we relate with that version of ourselves? If we had less and less of inner imprisonment, we might find that the weight and the judgment of how we react or respond becomes less about us and less about the other, but more and more opportunities of where we want to go, what we want to create, how we want to be, and less about the problem that we were dysregulated or that we were uncontrolled, and more about returning to equanimity, where that thing that's arising is just a facet of the whole of us that is not a problem. And in fact, if we took the judge out of it and we looked, it's just doing what it does, right? If somebody is trespassing our boundaries and they continue to trespass, those are, on a very human level, those are very common themes that we might feel when somebody violates our boundary. I said no. There you are doing it again and again and again. And then the inner questions, don't you care about me because I said no? And the whole stories that we've created, and yet we're feeling that the other person is not conscientious of us, our existence, our space, our right to be here, and that this quality of somehow trying to control or dominate us and going outside of their own sphere of influence into ours can feel like a very deep, visceral, these ancestral trespasses that we feel when people take from us what was not freely given. And so it can be natural that these things arise within us, and we may not even know that we have such deep visceral relationships with these energies until we do. And so if we controlled them through the judge of right and wrong, we might never reach the space of being able to just observe more the risings of these without making ourselves wrong for feeling them, without making the other wrong for doing what they do, and without making the situation wrong for being there. If not, it's all teaching us something about ourselves. And when we can live more from a place of discernment and not fall into judgment, we live more in a space of equanimity, more in a space of what's possible. And the freedom, the soul freedom to make those choices from what's possible versus what's possible within a condition of possibilities. And although discernment may seem like it's a judge, because on some level it is included in discernment, the gravity of the judge, where the judge is the operating software, over discernment being an operating software, and it's a bigger software where judgment is in there, but it doesn't override the equanimity. Then we start to see from discernment, we've already have like the tension of the judge that's in there, but there's freedom within the tension to choose, and we start to see that discernment has tension within it, but it's not, there's no, it doesn't pull us into a immorality or an ethicality as a person. It's not limiting us. The judgment is limiting the personhood because it is deemed all the things that are of God, that there are things that are good and bad, that are right and wrong, that have to be pushed away or have an aversion to or separate from. When almost like the condemning that happens, where it can no longer be included. Where with discernment, we move beyond judgment and it's all included. And we see and feel a lot more refined. The tension that occurs is more distilled, and we perceive it more like a yes and no in alignment with, and in integrity with alignment. I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for being with me.